Hi guys, I'm Cristian and today I'm going to be reacting to the Nørmann Jorgensen reading called Ideologies and Norms in Language and Education Policies in Europe and Their Relationships with Every Language Behaviors. There are a lot of ideas that I want to talk about, so I will try to be as clear as possible so that you can understand me. Let's begin. Okay, first, it's quite interesting that he begins by giving us those clarities about the terms of monolingual and multilingual to refer to the relationship that speakers have with one or more languages. At the same time, the author states that the concept of languages cannot be perceived as an individual or detached from one another, but rather it is an abstract idea in which the characteristics that can relate to languages are recognizable. Regarding that, I totally agree, since languages, if we think about them individually, it doesn't make sense. Languages didn't create themselves, but they are the result of social inventions that are influenced by a lot of things and historical elements that have shaped what we know today as the Spanish language, the English language, and some others to say something. So languages have relied on others to be able to establish themselves and to form their pragmatic senses. The key then is to be able to conceive these languages as a set of characteristics that vary according to the context. But in this way, a problem arises when schools classify languages as separate entities that cannot be involved. That is to say that specific structures must be applied when speaking. I differ regarding that because there is nothing as chaotic as language. Language empowers you to play with it in a marvelous, fluid way. And I believe that this is due to how language teaching has been considered as something idealized and perfect that we can easily identify and track. For example, I'm not always going to order a hamburger as some professors taught in school. I must have that sharpness to adapt the language to the context and have extensive use or command of the language. So here's the deal with the categorization of language and their use. We must always decide what's better, what is more appropriate, what is more beneficial, but what we don't consider is that it is possible to work in an integrated way so as not to fall into the mistake of wasting the great potential that exists when discourses can be integrated to achieve a better performance in both languages. Thus, in the document they spoke about the integrated bi or multilingualism that proposed that people fully use their communicative competence in both languages according to the needs they had. And immediately a question came to my mind, and it is how not to cross that fine line between code switching and what is known as language interference. Because you have to be very attentive to be able to apply code switching effectively. Then I think you can easily fall into a misunderstanding about the terms and how you can use them the best way. So there is the deal with this topic. Now moving on to another part of the text, the difference between the knowledge of a language and the awareness of its linguistic features is important, as they are different in the sense that the latter doesn't necessarily imply the language is understood and that a language can be spoken, but it is the recognition of the language that is being spoken or read through some symbol or element of that language. Even knowing a single word in Mandarin or Dutch is an initial knowledge of the language. If we introduce that single word into our everyday language, there is already code switching and interaction between languages, so that we only know the linguistic characteristics but not the language per se. So my interpretation of that will be that interaction with other languages and bilingualism starts from things as small as saying just one word in an unknown language. Okay, another thing that captured my attention was the matter of owning a language. Someone who acquires the right to belong to some territory by speaking as natives is something very unfair. It's very unfair and I'm not in agreement at all. First, because I think it secularizes and distorts the goal of learning a new language, which is to communicate with the world. So the purpose of learning an L2 is distorted. And second, it is this thing that language doesn't belong to anyone. For example, I don't understand the people who say that in the United States you cannot speak a language other than English when the US doesn't have an official language. It is the convergence of many languages. Therefore, there are incredible emerging variations in some places from the United States regarding dialects, slang, and some other things. Okay, now speaking about the use of language in the youth of Copenhagen, I would love to be able to play with language like that, the way the author shows in some of the examples. But I started to think about the tremendous contrast between the Copenhagen and Colombian youth, and I felt so impressed to see how they intertwine so many linguistic characteristics of languages. For instance, here in Colombia, from my perspective, young people mostly use only Spanish and English, but at higher levels of education. For example, I speak like that with my friends, but a child who is in a public school, he cannot do that. He doesn't have the tools to play with language in that way, so you can see the difference in the quality of education and the influence of other cultures in the territory.